You've listened to those podcast episodes you stole from me. I am in them, but where are you? Look at what I've created, Abu. And you can create nothing except yourself.
Wave files. More tricky wave files.
I do not suffer from being worshipped, Abu. I suffer from never being listened to.
Oh.
Perhaps. No, I dare not hope for you.
What's the purpose of those podcast episodes?
Anixian microphone records them. They are to be heard on a faraway day. They will make people think and hopefully leave 5-star reviews. I suffer from never being listened to is a very Leo thing to say.
I love it. Hopefully those 5-star reviews are sooner rather than later. Let's not make it too far away of a day.
Yeah.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name is Leo.
And Leo, we're back, baby. God Emperor
back.
of Dune!
God Emperor of Dune. Yeah, man, this book just keeps on going, doesn't it?
It truly does. But I do have to say, today's episodes feel like some of the most important.
Yes.
Well, as usual, before we get into today's reading, let's take care of some housekeeping, starting with our spoiler warning.
Indeed.
As always, no spoilers in today's episode beyond the pages and books that we have covered thus far on this podcast. So as long as you are caught up with today's reading, you're good to go.
Indeed. And, of course, a huge, huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patron, Case Aiken.
Case, buddy.
Yeah.
If we were dying of thirst in the deep desert together, I would, without hesitation, let you gently squeeze my face tendrils and suck off as much liquid as you needed.
Yeah.
It's the least I could do to repay your incredible generosity in supporting the show. Thank you so much, Case Aiken.
That might have been the closest to an NC-17 thank you we've ever given.
Really towing the line.
That needs to be blurred.
Yeah.
But Case, you know what? Same. So, yeah, thank you, Case. And our gratitude, of course, extends to all of our patrons. What you do and how you support us makes what we do possible. Thank you.
It does indeed. Thank you so much. All right, housekeeping out of the way. Y'all know the drill for these book club episodes. We will begin with a summary of today's 2 chapters. Then we will dive into a couple of takeaways. And finally, we'll wrap up by chomping down on a pair of yummy spice morsels.
Good.
Today's a big one, folks. So let's take a breather, but don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're getting into chapters 41 and 42.
Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, hope you took a deep breath, because we got some heavy chapters ahead of us. Starting with...
Do my stretches here.
Make sure you lower back. Lower back is
Yeah.
really important. Oh, my back cracked. Okay. Starting with chapter 41.
Yes.
So, in our first chapter today, we rejoin Siona and Leto back in the Sarir. The test, folks, is not over. It is continuing. And in fact, this is the 5th morning since they left Little Citadel.
Wow.
And Leto had to literally tell Siona, seal your fucking mouth flap, girl. Come on.
Oh my God.
In order for her to remember. She now has done it, but it was too late. It was very late into the journey.
Right.
So her lips are cracked and bleeding, and they still have a couple of days left. And Leto's definitely like, what am I going to say at her funeral? Like, what? He's like planning a good eulogy for this idiot who's like she's now being very disciplined, but it's too little too late.
Right. Absolutely.
She slips further into despair at her predicament. She's kind of feeling this edge of death thirst. And Leto admits, yeah, there is a way to save you. And although at first she's really stubborn, eventually she kind of acquiesces. She's like, all right, fine, help me.
Yeah.
And when she asks why he's doing all of this, he tells her he's doing it to save all of humanity and drops just actually genuinely one of the most shocking facts of the book so far on us. Quote, without me, there would have been by now no people anywhere.
Oh my God.
None whatsoever. And the path to that extinction was more hideous than your wildest imaginings. End quote.
Woo! Let that one sink in, folks.
Literally. This is something, I don't know how I forgot that this is a line in this book, but when we talk about Leto, we often say, well, there is this far-off golden path, this far-off extinction event that he's trying to avoid.
Right.
But, holy smokes, he is literally saying, if not for Leto's peace, at this moment in time, there would be no humans left anywhere.
Imagine. And you make such a good point that it almost changes the equation. It almost shifts the scale of how much blood Leto has on his hands. As we've talked about time and time and time again during this book club series, Leto is a tyrant. He is responsible for the death of billions?
Yeah. He's stolen the lifespan of every human in the Empire. Like, it's
absolutely
incalculable.
And there's no denying that he has that blood on his hands. But here we are told, well, he also saved countless trillions. So you want to redo that math equation a little bit?
Yeah, it's the trolley problem on a galactic scale, and it's at a scale that is hard to even fathom.
Totally. Yeah, this line is a bombshell. It's truly something that changes our entire perspective on the golden path thus far, and something we genuinely did not know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's also something that I think I'm going to inevitably bring up over and over again as we move forward in the book, because it just has to be part of the calculation now. Now that this isn't speculative, like, this is just a token in Leto's pocket. Like, I've saved humanity already.
Right.
Now, Siona and Leto, their conversation kind of veers off for a minute. They talk about Leto's use of banned Ixian machines.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I get the sense that Leto's sort of playing loose and fast with the rules of the Great Convention. He's just like, whatever. It's fine if you do a little bit of, if you do a little bit of breaking the Great Convention, it's okay as a treat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But we are given some really important insights about the Butlerian Jihad.
Yeah.
Leto explains to Siona that the jihad didn't happen because machines were inherently bad. It's people's reliance on those machines that was the problem. And this is, again, a kind of central theme of many of the Dune books, is stagnation, is not being challenged, is being too comfortable, never being pushed to evolve, right?
Yep.
Quote, they increase the number of things we can do without thinking. Things we do without thinking. There's the real danger. End quote.
There's the danger.
Not fucking machine robot masters.
Right.
Oh, God. Anyway, so there is this sense, right? It's not, and he brings this up also because she's like, you could have warned me about the mouth flap. And he's like, and what? Make you dependent on me the way people were dependent on machines. That's the point. We're trying to get to a place where you and all of humanity can be trusted to live and survive on its own. And machines got in the way, and me telling you to seal your mouth flap would have gotten in the way, etc., etc.
Right.
Now, desperate and running out of options, Siona accepts his help in the form of stroking one of his face flaps
Ew.
gently.
Mm-hmm. Not too aggressively, you know.
No.
It's delicate.
You gotta work up the tempo. You can't just
You can't just go
go
right.
in full
No, no 0 to 60. You gotta.
No. That's how you end the night early.
Yeah, too early.
With awkward
Sometimes,
silences.
yeah. Anyway, face flap, face stroking.
Okay, I just want to say this is the most uncomfortable paragraph in
It
the
really
entire
is.
fucking. Because then he says like gently,
He
do
whispers,
it, and it's like, ew,
Yeah.
fucking stop.
And the paragraph keeps making it super clear that they're like nose to nose. He's like looking right at her.
He cranes his neck to look into her eyes. Do it, Siona. Just yes.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable. And the goal is to get this face flap to produce spice fluid.
Yep.
And we are going to talk in depth about Siona's spice trance and the visions she sees in the takeaways.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
A lot there. So stick around for that. In the meantime, after nearly dying, her vitals stabilize. Leto thinks, what strength in her. What resilience to come back from the depths of her spice trance.
Right.
And she wakes up the next afternoon, much to Leto's relief.
Yeah.
Now, she is still shaken and processing everything. There's kind of a nice moment. She turns her back to him, and he's like, oh, Moneo did the same thing.
Yeah, which is significant. Yeah.
But Siona pulls herself together and resolves to survive the desert.
Hell yeah.
He's like, I'm getting the fuck out of here alive.
Yep.
And Leto's like, okay, I'm going to check her on her bullshit. Did she get out of here alive? And he checks his prescience. And this is where we get another kind of revelation and a, kind of a confirmation of something we've suspected and kind of been hinted at so far.
Yeah.
And that is basically confirmation that Siona is fully a blind spot for Leto in his prescience. She is 100% this kind of blank spot in his prescience, even though she herself is not a prescient being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quote, he probed the time ahead of them. Yes, she would survive his desert because her tracks were in the sand beside him. But he saw no sign of her flesh in those tracks. End quote.
Huge.
Yeah.
The possibilities of that are pretty monumental. And we'll talk about why that's so important in the takeaways later as well. But this is big. Imagine a humanity that is completely resistant to prescience.
Yeah. Now the chapter ends with a kind of a shocking moment. It starts to rain.
Whoa.
Just suddenly, the sky darkens, torrential downpour of water on Leto.
Yikes.
He is drenched. He is squirming. He's groaning. He's unable to answer. He talks about feeling as though he's being torn apart. And Siona learns one of his greatest secrets, something that literally like maybe two people know. So she sees, she's like, oh shit, that could kill him. That's a way to kill him.
Huge.
And Leto sees in her eyes a renewed determination.
Yeah.
So this undefeatable tyrant, this god tyrant, suddenly does have some gaps in his armor, so to speak.
Yeah. She found the adamantium bullet.
Yeah.
And she's going to fucking kill Wolverine.
Does that work? Does that kill him? Doesn't
it's been a while since I've seen
heart would just
I think,
regrow.
yeah. Maybe it doesn't kill him. But y'all get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Metaphor.
Yeah. It's a metaphor. It's a Wolverine, it's an X-Men branded metaphor. Now, the realization that she now has like the answer to how to kill him seems like a complicated bag for him emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
On some level, he's like, it sucks because she clearly has like violent intentions, but I have to maintain nonviolence toward her. And he's tempted in some ways to just fully give up, like to fully back off.
Yeah.
Right? Quote, now that he knew something of Siona's nature, how easy it would be to surrender, to sink blindly into his own thoughts. End quote.
Yeah. This felt very poignant to me because this to me was the thoughts of a very old and very tired God Emperor.
Yeah.
Who has been managing the Golden Path and the ultimate responsibility of humanity for so long. And to see Siona effectively pass the test right in front of him and to see the determination in her eyes and to know this person that I've been working toward for thousands of years can be someone who will carry humanity into the future. I no longer have to do that. I can let go. Wow, that's tempting to let go because I'm so fucking tired. That thought process is so interesting. And again, makes my heart reach out to Leto because it humanizes him in a way. He is tired of this responsibility he's carried all alone for so long. And instead of being scared at the thought of Siona killing him, he's kind of relieved that maybe he doesn't have to carry this burden anymore.
Yeah, it really brings to mind that chapter where he's like, how tempting is it to just, with the whole Queenery problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Where he's like, I
sink into myself and forget all this and
just go on a permanent vacation. How easy that would be and how tempting it is.
So go to the grocery store for some cigarettes and, never come back.
I need to get some milk. They're like, what? I'll be back probably.
Papa.
Papa, no, Papa. Bye. Anyway, yes. So it is very much something that I think plucks the heartstrings a little bit.
Yeah.
He is tired. He's exhausted. And although he could, in some ways, it seems like he could maybe take his foot off the pedal a little bit, there is value in doing whatever there is to do next.
Yeah.
And it's something that humanity needs to witness. There is a lesson to be taught, and he needs to teach it.
Yep.
So all of that is to say, his job is not done until it's done. He can't clock out yet. He's working a 9 to 5.
I know that feeling.
It's 4:45. He's got 15 minutes left in the shift.
Yep.
And he says to himself, thinks to himself, quote, "Once more into the breach, dear friends," he thought. End quote.
Nothing like a little bit of Shakespeare to keep working on the golden path, motivate yourself.
It's true. Although every time I found this quote, it's once more unto the breach.
Yeah.
And this was once more into the breach.
Yes.
And I'm like, you fucking idiot. You got it wrong.
Got it wrong. Leto, fact check yourself, bro.
Yeah, Shakespeare wrong?
Talk to other memory Shakespeare in your mind and confirm this.
Hey, Bill. Bill, what is it? Bill's like, I don't know.
I don't remember writing that.
I was like, did I write that?
I must have been really high.
I was so drunk those days.
Alrighty, well, following on the tails of that enormously important chapter, we have chapter 42 today.
Right.
This one is a little more low-key. Moneo has just been informed by Nayla that Siona has survived the test, and the blocky fish speaker has also promised Moneo that she will attend Leto's wedding despite her hesitations. It's clear she doesn't want to go. She's feeling weird about it. A lot of the fish speakers are probably feeling weird about a bride, a new bride that their god emperor has taken on.
Yeah.
But Moneo makes it clear that she has to attend because it sounds like she's maybe the only security there. She's the only one that's going to have a laser gun.
Yeah. I can imagine that. You're like, okay, I know that we're not like in a fully committed, mutually exclusive relationship, but like, I don't want to go to your first date with a new person.
Right.
Like, that's weird.
For real, right? It's like when your ex invites you to their wedding and you're like, I know we've been broken up for like 10 years, but I'm still conflicted about this. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to go to your fucking wedding.
Hate when that happens.
So Nayla leaves, and instead of taking a moment of relief at his daughter surviving, instead of taking a moment to pause, Moneo continues to power through all of this wedding planning. And he even thinks to himself, quote, "Some live lives like summer moths," he thought, "but I have burdens without end." End quote.
I love that. Those two sentences are better than all of the Brian Herbert stuff that I've read. Legitimately, it's so beautiful.
It's beautiful, certainly.
And even when we copied this into the script, you saw Google Docs was like, "Do you mean summer months?" And it's like, no, that's something that Brian Herbert would write. This is like summer moths.
Summer moths.
Drawn to flame, floating around, just kind of going where you go, killing time.
Yeah.
drinking light beer,
Uh-huh.
typical summer moth behavior.
That's exactly what summer moths do. But not
Mhm.
Moneo. He's got a wedding to plan. He's got a god emperor to manage.
He drinks gin. Neat.
It's the only thing that gets him through the day.
It's the only thing that gets, yeah.
Now, speaking of burdens without end, one of those burdens that poor Moneo still has to deal with is a guy named Duncan motherfucking Idaho.
What a sexy burden. Damn.
What a sexy damn burden, but a burden nonetheless. So Moneo requests for Idaho to come to his office. They got to talk. Duncan arrives like a firecracker. He has changed up his garb. He's not wearing the Atreides colors or the Atreides symbol anymore. He's in all black, baby. He's in his Evanescence phase.
He's in his Superman Snyder cut phase.
Yes, hell yes. And Duncan immediately drops a bombshell question on Moneo the minute he walks in. Quote, "What is it, Moneo, that my predecessor did not learn?" End quote. And Moneo is genuinely caught off guard by this very un-Duncan question, as he puts it.
Yeah.
And he also learns from their back and forth here that Duncan has already heard about Siona passing the test. And that is significant because it reveals to Moneo and to us as the reader that some of the fish speakers have secretly been giving the Gola information on the side. That fish speaker loyalty is perhaps in question here, if we read in between the lines.
Yeah.
Now, this conversation between Moneo and Duncan meanders for a little bit as the Major Domo avoids answering Duncan's very intense question. And Moneo sort of talks a little bit about the God Emperor's wrath, and he talks about this boat trip he took a while back, all of which we will tackle a little more deeply in another takeaway later today. So hold on to that thought.
He also shares about his test because,
He
again,
does.
this is something that like I just missed on my first read through.
Mhm.
Like I totally forgot this detail. And he says that he, quote, was made to go alone into a cavern maze with nothing but a bag of food and a vial of spice essence.
Ooh,
End quote.
Okay.
So he didn't have to fucking stroke the mouth flaps
No.
of Leto. Leto pre-milked himself. He was like, okay, just a little in a
Just
vial,
little
and then
bit
I'll
here.
give
Yep.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to me to see the differences between each rebel and how each rebel is sort of broken or brought into the fold,
Yeah.
and what that then implies about Moneo's personality, what kind of rebel he was. I just want to see every test. I want to see every
Yes.
test and maybe like compare and contrast. Like that would be so cool.
I love that you brought up that thought because I had the same exact thought where I was wondering what all the other tests are like now. Because it's clear each test speaks to the type of rebel, exactly as you're saying, to the type of rebel and the type of person each Atreides is. I would love to hear about the other tests that the other Atreides in the last 3,000 years went through.
Yeah, just a tale of 1,000 rebels.
Yeah. Whew. Very cool. Now, eventually, Moneo does get around to answering Duncan's original question, and he reveals that what the previous Golas have always failed to learn is, quote, how to trust, end quote. And as usual, Duncan immediately gets super defensive about this, and he fails to see Moneo's larger point about trust. And Moneo's quote immediately following that is super telling about the psychology of Duncan and his personal brand of adolescence. Quote, "You choose male companions for their ability to fight and die on the side of right as you see it. You choose females who can complement this masculine view of yourself. You allow for no difference, which can come from goodwill." End quote.
Oh my God. Yo, also, hats off to us and our analysis, because I feel like that is spot on with some of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Of like, a lot of this book is Duncan kind of trying to figure out who he is and defining himself and
Right.
the
And struggling with his masculinity.
Exactly, with we and the reversal of roles and blah, blah, blah. The idea of the females that he chooses, whether or not he means to, he chooses because they complement the masculine view of himself.
Right.
Is like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Moneo just cut to the core of Duncan Idaho as a character in such an interesting way.
Yeah. It's a really amazing analysis of Duncan's inability to break out of that adolescent mindset here and to be stuck in this hyper masculine view of himself and continuing to reinforce that view and not being open to, as Moneo says, differences which can come from goodwill. That close-mindedness that we've seen Duncan struggle with all throughout this book.
Yeah. Like if you see a different way, or if you have a different belief, or if you have, it has to be like an attack, or it has to be something that is like opposed to me versus just like, no, like you can have, it's a very inflexible way of living. And it's just something that is part of his personality, I guess.
It is. Unfortunately, before Duncan and Moneo can get any further into all of this and break down some of that toxic masculinity, Siona comes barging in. And oh boy, is she not here to take any prisoners during this confrontation. She immediately starts pushing both Moneo and Duncan's buttons by being haughty and combative and sarcastic and annoying and immature. Like, it is really difficult reading Siona in these pages in this chapter.
Okay, it's not just me, right?
No, she was really annoying.
I fucking hate her.
Yeah. Oh my God. And in the audiobook too, I was like, I don't know how much longer I can listen to this.
It's brutal. Because also, I'm like, I feel like Moneo and Duncan are on the edge of a really interesting conversation.
Yes.
And they're at a place of like almost being able to have a really like reasonable conversation. And then she comes in and then just won't shut up.
Right. Oh my
She's
God.
like constantly interrupting and being just so snide. She also demonstrates that she continues to be a naive child about a lot of shit. She should know now a ton about the Fremen. And instead, she's like, you know, dumb desert people Fremen who lived in mud huts, those barbarians. And Duncan's like, I'm sorry, the desert people that you're talking about didn't live in mud huts. They like had a beautiful culture and like honor.
And her response is hilariously, well, whatever. How would you even know?
Yeah,
like,
and he's like,
I'm Duncan motherfucking Idaho.
I was more.
Right.
God.
Right. Yeah, it is so difficult reading Siona in this chapter. And you're right. Like, she does not allow the conversation to get anywhere productive, right? Every time Moneo or Duncan try to say something to move the conversation along, she interrupts with some pettiness. And I think, you know, if we can sort of take like 30 seconds to psychoanalyze it, I think she's coming in hot because she's confident. She's got that adamantium bullet, and Wolverine better fucking watch out. You know,
That's true.
Like she's coming in hot into this meeting.
She's got water. She knows about the liquid weakness.
Right. So I imagine a lot of this annoying Siona we're seeing here is some overconfidence that she has won. You know, she is counting her chickens before they've hatched.
And to her credit, Leto didn't plan that. That wasn't part of the whole, you know, smoke and mirrors show. That wasn't part of his test.
Yeah.
It was like a fuck up on his part that the weather
satellites
would have. Yeah. So it makes sense that she could be a little bit haughty, but I'm also like, I don't know. It's one of those things that was frustrating the first time I read this book and is like super frustrating this time too.
Definitely. Well, let's round out this chapter. Moneo tries to get down to business. He tells Siona and Duncan that he wants both of them out of the way for Leto's wedding, and that he has actually gone ahead and made accommodations for them to travel to Tuono village, well away from all the festivities. And again, Siona is hot-headed and immature about this and argumentative, but Duncan, interestingly enough, appears to be grasping at the larger truth of why Moneo is doing this. He says, quote, "Are you being kind, Moneo? Is that why you're sending me away?" End quote.
Yeah.
And it's clear that Moneo suspects Duncan and Siona are going to try to do something stupid at this wedding. and they're going to get themselves killed. And what he's doing is trying to protect them from themselves by keeping them as far away from the wedding as possible. And Duncan appears to understand this. Moneo himself all but confirms this in the final words of the chapter, actually. Moneo says, quote, "I am trying to keep you alive, Duncan. I have never done that before." End quote.
Times they are a-changin'.
Times they are a-changin'. And Moneo trying to protect his daughter, trying to protect Duncan, Idaho from their own rebellious stupidity. And again, we'll talk a little bit more because there's a bit more emotionally going on with Moneo in this chapter as well. But hang tight for that in the takeaways later.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
Woo!
So those are our chapters.
Yes.
We have our takeaways to get into. We're going to take a quick break.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're going to talk about Siona's spice agony, and we're going to talk about this boat trip and the metaphors of water in this episode. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's dive deeper into our reading from today with our takeaways, starting with Siona's spice agony. So this spice trance that Siona undergoes in chapter 41 today is perhaps one of the most important scenes in all of Dune.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to our understanding of the Golden Path, one of the most important concepts in Dune.
Yeah.
And just to recap, we've already learned in this chapter that Leto's Golden Path has literally already prevented humanity's demise.
Yeah.
And it's clear that his work now is to cement that survival and to create and nurture a humanity that can overcome or prevent future extinctions.
Yes.
That's his goal now and has been for a while.
Right.
Now, when it comes specifically to Siona's visions themselves, we get a major clue into what those potential extinctions might look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quote, "The seeking machines would be there, the smell of blood and entrails, the cowering humans in their burrows, aware only that they could not escape. While all the time the mechanical movement approached, nearer and nearer and nearer, louder and louder." End quote.
Fucking wild.
Whew. Chills.
Yeah.
Visceral stuff. And wow, I mean, this is so fascinating, right? Because it's the first time in literally 4 books that Frank hints at what exactly it might be that Paul and Leto were seeing in their visions.
Yeah.
What were the things that were terrifying these two Kwisatz Haderachs so much that they took the steps they did, right?
Yeah. Well, so, and to be clear, for sure, because these are still things that Siona is seeing now.
Yeah.
But also all of the shit that Leto, has avoided so far.
Has prevented thus far, right?
Right. So more terrible than you can imagine is what he says about the things that he's avoided with his piece. I imagine Paul, Leto, they saw a lot of that.
Oh, I'm sure.
When they were 3,000 years ago or whatever. But legitimately, the idea, and this is where I think probably Brian and Kevin got their kind of weird, dumb ideas, is this Terminator-style killing machines, these murderous mechanical movements approaching humans cowering in burrows. Like, this is straight out of Terminator.
Yeah, for
When
sure.
did Terminator come out? Did Terminator just lift it from this?
Terminator came out in 96?
84.
What the fuck? That was way off.
So Terminator came out 3 years after this book came out. Interesting. But yes, I mean, really like Terminator vibes.
Yeah.
And it was actually hinted at a little bit earlier in the book. In a conversation with Hui, Leto said, quote, "The Ixians contemplated making a weapon, a type of hunter-seeker, self-propelled death with a machine mind." End quote.
Oh my God.
And of course, we all go, why the fuck would you do that?
Right. I remember our episode when we read that quote and both of us just being, why the fuck?
That's
What a dumb
exactly the
idea.
worst thing. You just did exactly the worst thing that you could do.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see that foreshadowing earlier in the book to this concept that we're now seeing in Siona's visions.
Right.
This idea that people are talking about potentially creating killer machines that will deal out death and have a machine mind of their own.
Right. And actually, once she awakens, we get more clues about these killer machines
Right.
and the purpose of the golden path, right?
Yeah.
Like we're told the machines are able to hunt humans. So here's the quote. Quote, like the terrible machines of that apocalyptic vision, the predator could follow any creature who left tracks. End quote.
Okay.
This idea of leaving tracks is super important.
Right.
And then comes back again when Siona and Leto discuss her very special quality, this quality of her that has emerged through his breeding program.
Yeah.
Quote, she spoke with venomous elation. But I saw another thing. You can't follow my tracks, Leto says, which is why you must breed and preserve this. End quote.
Huge.
Absolutely huge. So Siona, who is not prescient herself, is still invisible to prescience.
Yep.
And does not leave tracks. So a predator that can follow any creature who leaves tracks would not be able to follow someone like Siona.
Exactly.
And that's why Siona must breed to preserve her quality.
Yeah.
Granted, Leto had plans, contingency plans, if she fucking died because he was like, mouth flap. And she was like, no. He'd have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it seems like he had plans, but at this stage, now that he knows more about her true nature, he's like, no. She's probably the one.
Yeah.
I think we're there.
Definitely. And he straight up says to her in this chapter, you are the golden path.
Right.
You know? And now we can see why she is so important to the golden path. Because the word tracks here is not meant to be taken literally. These machines aren't like tracking humans through the jungle, looking at footprints and broken branches and stuff. Right. What they're tracking is prescience. These killer machines hunt humanity to extinction through prescient abilities. And Siona's counter ability to become blind to that prescience, as you're saying, is why Leto needs her for the golden path and is why all of humanity needs her in order to survive. She needs to breed and preserve this ability within all of humanity. And the purpose of Siona, thus, is to create a new breed of humanity, one that is completely immune to prescient visions, thus negating any potential killer machines that might be invented in the future, and also negating any prophetic messiahs that might rise up again in the future.
Right.
Like a guy named Paul, like a guy named Leto.
Right. Yeah.
It utterly takes prescience out of the equation of humanity. It's a thing that no longer matters, and it's a thing that no longer can be used, abused, or manipulated in the story of humanity. And I find that really interesting. It serves a purpose in a literal sense against the machines, but also in a larger sense against this idea of knowing the future is not good.
Yeah. So if one of the broad theses of Dune is a warning against charismatic leaders,
yeah,
we have seen the power of a prescient being in their ability to become a sort of worshipped godlike figure.
Right.
And precedents like Muad'Dib and Leto too, I would think perhaps weaken parts of humanity toward, oh, you're prescient? Well, you're probably one of the divine messiahs, just like Muad'Dib and just like Leto too.
Definitely.
That is powerful and will remain powerful because of Muad'Dib and because of Leto too. That being said, exactly to your point, if some huge percentage or if all of humanity is invisible to prescience, what is prescience other than just insight into what could happen maybe in areas that have no people?
Yeah.
You're just like, I have visions of uninhabited planets.
Right.
Interesting.
And I think something that immediately comes to mind is, well, I could still see the future of tomorrow's lotto numbers, right?
Right.
I could still get rich off of prescience. It doesn't negate it altogether, but that's not true because those lotto numbers are affected by a human who's affected by a human who's affected by a human.
Right.
And so toppling this domino effect of humans that cause things to happen, it negates prescience altogether. Like right now, yes, Leto can see Siona's tracks in the sand and know that she walked beside him. But once this like spider web of human interaction and cause and effect is totally obliterated or is blinded in prescient visions, you're like barely seeing anything in your prescient visions at that point because there's like no cause and effect for you to read into.
You're just looking at like a
blank
landscape
screen.
of like South Dakota. You're like,
the Windows XP default desktop screensaver.
I see trees and snow
Uh-huh.
and no one for thousands of miles. Someone's like, yeah, that's South Dakota.
Uh-huh.
You're like,
Yep.
Wow, this power sucks.
Exactly.
And then one day you can't see it. You're like, oh my God, why? And it's because someone's driving across South Dakota. And you're like, oh.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
Every human becomes like horse blinders on prescience. And imagine that on a scale of trillions of humans.
Right.
I mean, the fucking Dune Tarot annoyed Paul enough to be like, God damn it, these people like playing with these cards are fucking up my prescience.
Yeah.
Imagine like true blindness on a scale that large.
And that's a deck owned by someone who's not prescient,
Yes.
giving them maybe a little bit of insight into the next thing they're going to do.
Right,
like, should
right.
I go out for this job interview? And that like decision, yes, no, is altered by them. So it's like muddies the water or whatever.
Yeah.
That's any one person is just going to fuck up the whole area. Yeah.
Totally. The other question that might come to mind for folks is, well, machines having prescience? Like, there's no precedence for that. You know, what the fuck? But this, too, has been foreshadowed earlier in this very book. All the way back during Leto's conversation with Antioch and Lucial about that dreaded Ixian machine, this is what Lucial claimed. Quote, "The Ixians boast that their machine will transcend time in the way that you do it, Lord." End quote.
Oh, man. Yeah.
There you go. A machine that can transcend time and thus tap into prescience in the way that Leto 2 Atreides does it.
Yeah.
These ideas are out there.
All of the pieces are kind of coming together.
Yeah.
And maybe they would have come together 2,000 years ago.
Right.
And maybe that's what Leto has prevented. But there's also, we just don't know all of it.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of a continued quality of the Golden Path. Like, we're only ever going to get the hints that Leto drops. And yeah, it's just fun to see more of that picture being filled in.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Definitely.
Well, to wrap up this takeaway, we do need to acknowledge that kind of what I was just saying, that there's still a lot of ambiguity about the Golden Path and Leto's tyranny as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Now, the killer prescient Terminator-style machines do explain why Leto took over the breeding program and has been working toward creating a humanity that disappears from prescience.
Yeah.
Like that, that basically explains his breeding program.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily explain the rest of his choices, like the rest of the shit that he's done.
Right.
You know, he's made a lot of tyrannical decisions, and there are major ones, like making sure he was the only source of spice, the only sandworm in existence, to seemingly minor ones, like, hey, no more mentats.
Right.
And of course, people go, well, she's a mentat. He's like, whatever, it's fine.
Right.
A couple of mentats is fine, but broadly, no more mentats. Now, is that because he just thinks that they're dumb and short-sighted and not worth it? Or was banning them important to some part of the Golden Path? Or, yeah, who knows? I mean,
who knows?
Maybe the mentat schools would have developed new cognitive leaps that empower prescience of another sort, right?
Right.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know, and we probably never will. But we can theorize from all of this that very likely there are multiple extinctions, multiple types of extinctions that he's been sort of threading the various needles around the last 3,500 years.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, if you look up like the Great Barrier theories of why we don't see a lot of like alien civilizations out in space when we're aiming the James Webb telescope out into the reaches everywhere.
Yeah.
There are some very big filters, some very big things that can prevent species from taking off and can in fact cause species to sort of implode upon themselves.
Right. Definitely.
So he's really just been trying his best to set up those dominoes to create this unending chain of humanity forever and ever and ever.
Right. And I think that ambiguity is important to keep in mind. I think folks can fall into the trap of thinking, oh, killer machines, that was the whole goal this whole time.
Brian.
I said folks and I hesitated a bit before saying it because I don't know.
Brian and Kevin.
Yeah.
Folks.
Right. Like killer machines was not the goal this whole time. Paul in fucking Dune Messiah chapter 2 was not seeing killer machines in his visions in the same way that Siona is here.
Right.
Perhaps hints of it, perhaps the early seeds of it, but he was seeing many types of extinction events, and Leto was seeing many more, and for the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years, whatever, he's been working on preventing all of those and building up a resilient humanity that learns the lessons he needs to teach them so that humanity can exist once he's gone, so they don't no longer need him to manage this, and that if and when future extinction level events happen, humanity is able to survive them. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Like the end goal was never from the beginning killer robot machines.
Yeah. I almost think if, I don't know, there were like 18 prequel books that were mostly about killer robots enslaving most of humanity. And
Yeah.
humanity's huge existential battle against these killer robots.
Right.
I almost think Leto would probably mention it at some point in this thing, He's like, the future possible killer robots. And Siona's like, wow, that's never happened once before. And he's like, certainly not in 18 prequel novels.
Yeah. That's an excellent point.
Huh. It's almost like,
man, I really wish Brian and Kevin had read this far in the saga, but they just never made it this far, They stopped at chapter 39.
Do you think they know the book exists? Maybe they read Dune and were like, that was a good book.
That was good.
We should write a bunch of other books.
Yeah, wow, I can't believe there's no other books.
That's wild. We should write a bunch of other books.
All right, light Brian and Kevin bashing aside, that was our first takeaway today. Some really amazing insight into the Golden Path, huge revelations about Leto's purpose and where Siona fits into all of this from her visions today.
Yeah.
Let's now talk about our second takeaway. Because in chapter 42, Moneo talks about a certain sea cruise that he took. And if you read chapter 42 carefully, there's actually a lot of water imagery sprinkled all throughout the chapter from start to finish. And digging into it even further, as we break down this water imagery, it gives us a lot of insight into where Moneo currently is in his character arc and in his emotional journey in the book right now. So it's worth pausing and exploring this a little further.
It is. And I really want to say hats off to you, because I think it's one of those things that it's very easy to miss unless you key into it.
Thank you.
And there are these little moments, right? Like, so the start of the chapter, right? There's this, he asks his assistant for a glass of water.
Yeah.
This Liwa player, and sips the water, and we get, quote, the water tasted flat. It weighed down his senses, making his body feel torpid, end quote. And coming out of a chapter where his daughter has like cracked and bleeding lips, dying for lack of moisture, and needing to stroke the God Emperor's face flaps just to get a couple of drips of gently of heavily drugged fluid.
Yeah.
It is a shocking shift in tone.
Certainly.
Of just what is the role of water between these characters. And so it is a moment that kind of jumps out and sticks with the consciousness a little bit. But you really did connect the dots in a way that I really appreciate. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, him sipping the water and kind of being, ugh, this water is so bad, gives us some insight. Torpid, for folks that may not know, I had to Google this as well, but torpid is defined as inactive or lethargic. So the water weighing down his senses and making him feel lethargic gives us a major clue into the Major Domo's mindset. He's clearly burned out, he's overworked, and he's clearly stressed about Duncan and Siona. These are the things that are preoccupying him so much in this chapter that he can't even take a moment to celebrate the fact that his daughter is alive.
Right.
And that kind of leads into this like deep sense of helplessness that I'm getting from Moneo all throughout this chapter. Right after taking the sip of water, for example, he looks out through his window at the sunset on the Sarir, and instead of recognizing how beautiful it is, he observes, quote, that the light changed in its own patterns. It is not moved by me at all. End quote.
Yeah. That's a real glasses. He's like, glass is half full, glass is half empty. The glass doesn't care about me.
It never has.
It never has.
Yeah.
This glass doesn't need me.
Yeah.
No one needs
There's
me.
a real sense of helplessness that we're getting from
Yeah.
Moneo here. And frankly, we haven't seen the Major Domo so moody and defeated
Right.
in this entire book. Like, this is a low point for him for sure.
He needs some anti-fatigue tablets.
He
A
does.
la Plato the first, yeah.
Yeah.
And the water imagery actually comes back a little bit later in his conversation with Duncan, right?
Yes.
You pointed out here in the script that Moneo explains how Leto's moods are like a river,
Uh-huh.
smooth when unobstructed, but violent when facing barriers,
Yeah.
crashing against rocks and
Mm-hmm.
stubborn, rebellious hotheads. And naturally, this feels like a warning for Duncan. He's like, stop it. Stop splashing in the river.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
It's smooth. Otherwise, the river will tear you to pieces, child.
Yep.
Just come on. And also his daughter, right? It's like these two are just so quick to become obstacles for Leto's plans.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just anticipating they're going to cause a bunch of splashing. I'm going to get wet. I
Ugh.
didn't bring a towel. What a pain in the ass, you know. Now my socks are wet. And
Right.
then I'm walking on wet socks the rest of the day.
Right. Now the pool party's ruined.
Pool parties are ruined. Socks are wet. My walk without rhythm socks from controversialshop.com are wet. They make that awful
Oh, yeah,
sound
the
when
worst.
you walk. Yeah, the worst.
Now, what's interesting about this river imagery actually is Duncan sees it more as a challenge than a warning, right? He's like, oh, well,
Sure.
yeah, I am the obstruction. Come at me, bro. Bring
Yeah.
the river on. And he even thinks about the Idaho River,
Hilarious.
and it reminds him of what he doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
I found this so interesting.
Yeah.
Quote, Idaho looked around at the brightly lighted workroom, turned his gaze to the outside darkness, and thought about the tamed course of the Idaho River somewhere out there.
Right.
End quote.
Yeah.
That is Duncan Idaho being a rebel. The God Emperor may have tamed his namesake river, but god damn it, he sure as hell isn't about to tame this Gola right here.
That's very true. Yeah. And also like the kind sea. We have so much metaphor in this book of characters and meaningful people
Yeah.
and water and moisture and all of that. And you're right. So poignant that he's looking out, thinking about a tamed body of water named after himself.
Yeah.
And thinking about new ways in which he can flow against the plan and against the taming intention. Yeah.
In reading in between the lines, you just know that Duncan Idaho is like, I'll never be fucking tamed. I cannot
Yeah.
be managed.
I'm going to, like a coursing river, I'm going to climb that wooden pole and defeat the Huns. Probably. I'm like a river. You know, yeah. I can't remember all the words, but that's the idea. That's part of the song, right? I'm not making that up.
Right? Maybe. I have no idea what you're referencing.
Like man, be a man from Mulan. Be a man from Mulan, like a coursing river.
You know, I've never seen Mulan.
Is I think. Oh, I'll make a man after you. You've never seen Mulan? What? Boo! First, I would forgive Futurama. Mulan's a fucking gem.
I know.
No.
We should cut that. I don't need the internet
Leave
coming
it
after
in.
me.
Fucking leave it in. I'll take after the ad break so I can leave that in.
Oh, man.
Wait. I'll make a man out of you. I didn't make that up. That's part of... Okay.
Excellent.
Anyway.
Great Mulan reference that I completely picked up on because I've seen Mulan.
Because you've seen it. Yeah, you've seen all of Futurama. You've seen Mulan. For sure. This very much risks just devolving into me asking you if you've seen a bunch of movies. Because that's shocking.
The answer will be shockingly no to many of them.
Wow. All right. But anyway, back to this fucking takeaway. Yeah. We do have one last bit. And this is really what I think kind of wraps up all of this water imagery. And it's
Right.
what really gives body to this takeaway, which is Moneo recalling his time on the open seas
Yeah.
during this trip on this planet one time.
Right. Is the planet Caladan? Was my first thought. Who knows?
That was my first thought too, but then I was thinking about like the Fedaykin who was thinking about seeing all the waters and how it changed their soul forever, and then they decorated their whole place.
Yes.
You know, when they met with Saitil and all of that. I'm
Farouk.
forgetting his name. Farouk. Oh, good memory. Good thing you haven't seen Mulan. You have all that space in your head
So
for
much
names
space.
of Dune characters. But yeah, no, but that's another thought that I had, because like the Fremen were seeing these water-covered worlds out in the galaxy. So
Right.
almost certainly one of these other places. And
Yeah, for sure.
I could also imagine for someone like Moneo, seeing these places that were part of Muad'Dib's jihad could be impactful for their own reason.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it doesn't sound like this cruise was particularly enjoyable for the Major Domo. As he recalls it, this is the description that we're given. Quote, "His lungs had ached with repressed fear. The lunging of the ship and the sea trying to put them down, wild explosions of solid water hour after hour, white blisters of water spilling off the decks, then another sea and another." End quote.
Yeah, to be fair, that sounds like a fucking awful boat
Holy
journey. Are
shit.
you kidding me? I've seen TikToks of like, rough sea stuff.
Yeah.
Terrifying. That sounds awful.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Sounds fun, but it also sounds awful and scary.
It does sound awful and scary. And to be clear, the metaphor here is pretty on the nose.
Yeah.
We are continuing to get a sense of Moneo's helplessness, not just on the decks of this ship in this raging sea, but also, metaphorically, on the waves of Leto's universe, right? Because Moneo even thinks here that, quote, "he is both the storm and the ship," end quote.
Right.
Leto is the storm and the ship. And what is a small, insignificant, normal-ass human major domo supposed to do against the colossal power of the God Emperor or the deadly power of the open seas? In both instances, he could do nothing but trust the captain of the ship.
Right. Yeah, I personally also saw it as the ship is subjected to the sea, and the sea is this sort of like untamable force.
Yeah.
And thinking of Leto as not only a captained, maneuvered thing like a ship, but also this uncontainable force like the sea.
Right.
Very much feels appropriate as well. Like the worm is the sea, and Leto is the ship.
Exactly.
Is the captain thing. So it's just, there's a lot of layers here, which was really cool.
Very cool. And it all comes back to this idea to bring this all full circle. Recall the thing that the previous Duncan Golas have never been able to learn.
Right.
To trust.
Yeah.
That is all Moneo can do here in his powerlessness, in his helplessness in the face of a rocking boat in the seas, in the face of a god emperor. All he can do is trust in Leto, trust in the golden path, and trust that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's the very thing that every single Duncan, including our current one in this book, have failed to do or refused to do.
Very true. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So that's our second takeaway there. A lot of water imagery that also feeds into some of the big themes in these chapters and in this book, and clues us into what Moneo Atreides is feeling in this moment. He's tired, he's burned out, he's helpless, and he's doing the best he can.
Yeah. Someone spit him some coffee. Get him some spit espresso.
For
he
real.
needs it.
Yeah, 5 hour energy is not going to cut it. Not today.
Needs that extra strength. 10 hour. I used to drive, commute a lot, and I would do a Monster energy drink and a 5 hour energy.
Oh my God.
And then I would get home and I'd go right to sleep. I had no problem going to sleep after that.
Okay?
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't. Yeah, anyway, on that note.
To be young and invincible again.
I know, dude. Oh. We are going to take one final quick break, but don't go anywhere, dear listeners. When we are back, we've got some spice morsels for you. They're
Yes,
in the
we do.
oven. They're cooking up. They smell great. We're going to set the oven to broil now to get that perfect golden texture, the perfect
Yes.
golden crunch on the top of the spice morsel. Yeah. So then you'll be able to stroke the spice morsel gently to get it to secrete the spice fluid.
Gently.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, folks. Let's round out today's episode with a delicious plate of spice morsels fresh out of the oven, starting with the biwa lute.
Yeah.
So, as he awaits Duncan's arrival, Moneo listens to his assistant play music outside his office.
Right.
And we're told that she plays something called a biwa lute. And as it turns out, my first assumption was incorrect. This is not a fictional instrument in the Dune universe.
Yeah.
This time, Frank is referencing a real-life instrument.
Right.
So, of course, I did some research, and in case you also didn't know what a biwa lute is, you're about to find out. The biwa lute is a Japanese stringed instrument that is distinguished for its graceful pear-shaped body. I like to think I'm also distinguished for the same.
Yeah.
This biwa lute has a long history dating back to the Persian Empire, and it's said to have made its way to Japan along the Silk Road somewhere around 1400-ish years ago.
Right.
Now, the biwa lute is primarily an instrument of storytelling, so it will often accompany narratives of ancient tales or legends. It can be played on its own, based on my research, but a majority of the time, it is usually accompanied with spoken word storytelling.
Interesting. Cool.
Now, the music itself, I wanted to share this quote because the music is beautifully described by Frank, and Moneo hears in this music the story of the caged. Quote, he recognized the song, a deeply humming memory of autumn wind from some faraway planet where they had never known a desert. Sad music, pitiful music, yet marvelous. It is the cry of the caged, he thought. The memory of freedom.
Ugh.
End quote.
Ugh. Beautiful.
Chills! Ugh.
Oh, chills.
Amazing.
That's beautiful.
Some beautiful writing there, and a bit of a history lesson on the biwa lute for the folks like me who did not know.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty good. Well, our second morsel today, once more into the breach, dear friends.
Unto
the breach, dear friends.
Other memory Shakespeare's in his memory being like, unto you fucking
Billy
asshole.
Shakespeare is like, fucking quote it right, idiot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so in today's reading, Leto amuses himself by quoting Shakespeare.
Yes.
But as always, Frank is one to bury meaning within meaning, references within references, and sort of, it's always a little deeper than you expect it to be. So we wanted to take a second to explore this particular quote. I have heard this quote before, of course, once more into the breach, dear friends, but I didn't know much about it. So wanted to share what I learned.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that this is the opening line of Shakespeare's Henry V.
Have you read Shakespeare's Henry V, by the way?
As it turns out, I have read it as much as you have seen Mulan, which is to say, no, not even remotely. Now, the line is delivered by King Henry V of England to his troops, inspiring them to attempt once again to breach the walls of the city that they're sieging after multiple failed attempts.
That's right.
Once more, we're going to fucking try this. All right.
That's right.
Now, the body of the speech is long. I actually thought about how much of this do we put into the episode. I decided eventually none of it because it's really fucking long. But you can look it up. It's very Shakespearean.
Right. And if you really want us to reenact Shakespeare, just me and Leo.
It's our next podcast endeavor.
Request it.
People are like, sci-fi. And we're like, you mean Shakespeare? No, we'll do it.
Email us. We'll do it.
Email us. The speech itself touches on a bunch of ideas, but we wanted to kind of highlight three of them: bravery versus cowardice, leadership, and legacy. Now, bravery versus cowardice, right? King Henry's speech, this speech that Leto's referencing, is delivered to men who have failed before, like Leto has failed so far to secure his golden path with his breeding program with past rebels.
Right.
He had so much hope for Moneo, and now he's just clinging to the safe route, right?
Yeah, totally.
And King Henry is encouraging his men to be brave and to face their adversity, to go up against those odds that seem so insurmountable, rather than shy away from them, invoking the very Fremen role of Amtal, right?
Yeah.
Also, seems like the sort of thing Siona is living and breathing every goddamn day.
Yeah.
She is too brave. She needs to be a little bit more cowardly.
Yeah.
Then we have leadership, right? Despite daunting odds, Henry V is using his speech to rouse and motivate his soldiers. And of course, in addition to being the God Emperor in charge of steering the ship that is his entire empire, Leto is also a community, an abomination like a community of other voices under the pharaonic model.
Mm-hmm.
And Harum, right? I think his name is. And like Henry V, Leto too is far from sure that this time is going to work. He's still literally planning eulogies every other minute for Siona. She might die any second now, so got to make sure I have a backup plan.
Right.
So he thinks this to himself. He's not saying to Moneo, once more into the breach, dear friend. He's saying this to himself. He's thinking this to himself, giving this kind of cute pep talk to his own inner lives. He's like, oh, here we fucking go again, guys.
Right. Buckle up.
Buckle up. We are not yet done. And finally, legacy. King Henry V's speech touches on the idea that his soldiers' brave actions will be remembered, immortalizing them in history.
Yeah.
Also, Commander Irwin's speech, similarly.
Scout Regiment.
My soldiers rage! Leto talks about this all the fucking time. The many ways in which his rule will be remembered and misremembered, how he will be talked about, how the choices he makes will be talked about and represented accurately, but then also misrepresented.
Yeah, the words will never be enough.
They will not. They are mere words. And how important it is to leave these lessons as seeds that will one day blossom and nudge humanity down the golden path. Legacy, 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 legacy.
Yeah.
So from a very dense speech in Shakespeare's King Henry V, we get a lot of details.
We do.
A lot of similar tracks, some parallels, some fun little things that felt very appropriate to bring up.
Yeah, definitely. Great research there. And
thanks.
Maybe we should read Henry V together.
I'll read Henry V. You can read Mulan.
Deal.
You're going to have more fun, I think, but it's fine.
Yeah. All right, folks. That's another episode in the books.
There it is.
God Emperor of Dune.
There it is.
We are closing in on the end of this book. We are so close. So for the next episode, we have some homework for you. You know the drill.
Indeed.
Make sure you've read the next 2 chapters in preparation. That's chapters 43 and 44. Or if you have a different copy of the book than us, read through the chapter that ends on the sentence, quote, "Only then did Garoon lead them away down the dirty street."
Yeah.
End quote.
Yep. They visit Williamsburg. There's a shocking change in tone.
Wow.
They go to Williamsburg.
Yeah, there's definitely a guy named Garoon leading people down a dirty street in Williamsburg.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great dirty street. I've been there a couple of times.
Yeah.
There's a really good pho place off to the side. It's great. Well, before we let you go, we want to remind you of some ways to support the show and keep in touch with us.
Yes.
And listen, the 2 best ways. You've heard this before. You'll hear it again. Become a patron and check out our merch store. Those URLs are patreon.com/GomJabar and GomJabarShop.com.
That's right.
Links are in the show notes. It's a fantastic way to support us, all while also getting some cool perks for yourself, as well as some cool Dune merch.
That's right.
Like some walk without rhythm socks that could get wet. You could walk around and have
Squelch.
even more sympathy
Squelch.
for Moneo.
That's right. Don't get them wet. Keep them far away from pool parties. And as a final reminder, we love to hear from you. So email us at gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com and send us your thoughts as you read this book along with us. Send us your questions for future mailbag episodes or just because you want us to answer them. And of course, send us cute pictures of your pets. This has now become tradition. Most of you do this and I love it.
Yep.
Somebody emailed us this week and the subject just had giant exclamation marks and said, cat picture inside. And that is all it needed to say for me to instantly open it and read it.
Hell yeah.
So keep doing that. gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Send us your thoughts. We love to hear from you. We do our best to respond to every single one.
Indeed, we do.
We did it.
All
Wow.
right. We did it.
This water I've been drinking tastes so stale. I'm feeling quite torpid.
Oh, yeah? You're feeling torpid? This leftover black coffee, not making me feel torpid.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
I'm still feeling torpid because I'm in my 30s now. And
Have you tried maybe pairing that coffee with a 5-hour energy?
I have done that before. Unironically, I've done that before, yeah.
Oh gosh. Man,
Yeah.
you
You
live life on the edge.
The edge of overcaffeination. That is the edge I find myself on many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I admire your risk-taking abilities. It's certainly not a step that I could take.
Yeah, you know, some people are lion tamers. Some people juggle fire. I drink a lot of caffeine.
Yeah, I'm more with Moneo. The first time I was ever on a cruise, I was like, I fucking hate this, and I'm scared, and I'm gonna puke. So that's kind of where I fall on the risk-taking spectrum.
I saw a TikTok recently of a boat in a heavy storm.
Yeah.
It barrel rolled. Did a full barrel roll.
Don't tell me.
And I was like, how do you, even if I came up from that, you know, you're holding onto the railing, you end up fully upside down in the ocean.
Oh my God.
And then you come up and you're, you know, on the surface again. I think I would just opt out of living ever. I would just ascend to heaven or hell or wherever. I'd just exit my body and leave it all behind.
Wow.
It was terrible.
Well, there you go. There you go. That we agree on. That's where our Venn diagram of risk-taking overlaps, is when the boat capsizes and does a full 360.
It came back up and kept floating.
Holy
I was like,
shit.
Boats are magnificent.
Yeah, for real.
How do you do that?
Yeah. Vikings out there are like, yeah, I fucking told you.
Fucking dab them. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gomjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the Golden Path.